Acts chapter 12, verse 1. Acts chapter 12, verse 1. Now, about the time Herod the king stretched forth his hands to vex certain of the church, and he killed James, the brother of John, with the sword. Because he saw it pleased the Jews, he proceeded further to take Peter also. Then were the days of unleavened bread. And when he had apprehended him, he put him in prison, and delivered him to 4 quaternions of soldiers to keep him, intending after Easter to bring him forth to the people. Now, here we see a situation here where James, the brother of John, James Zebedee, brother James, John, and Peter, of course, they were considered the pillars of the apostles. And James had been killed. And early on, I mean, this is Acts chapter 12. Acts is 20 chapters, and we see in Acts chapter, here in Acts chapter 12 about James being killed. And because that had given, because James had, as it was saying that, because it pleased the Jews that James had been killed, Peter also was taken. And Peter was apprehended. And Peter was basically brought to prison. He was brought to prison knowing that his one of the fellow apostles had been also killed. And he probably had to wonder, what Peter was thinking at the time. He probably had to wonder, hey, are they going to take my life also? Because it pleased the Jews that they had taken James's life, and now they're taking Peter, and they're putting him into prison. I mean, Peter's probably thinking, this is it. This might be it. They might be taking my life here, and it might be all over. And I think that we see that, I believe Peter was probably in a similar situation, not exactly the same as maybe as Job was. How many people love the book of Job? Mm-hmm. I mean, I read the book of Job this week, and I mean, it's just such a book that I think we can all relate to often in our lives. I think Job is a book that when you read it, you kind of get life in perspective. And obviously the book of Job had been around well before Peter was. And when Peter goes into prison, knowing that this might be it, that his life might be taken, and now let's face it, they crucified Jesus. They had taken James's life, and he's basically locked up. Now, if you turn your Bibles to Job chapter 10, verse 15. Job chapter 10, verse 15. And it says in Job 10:15, if I be wicked, woe unto me. And if I be righteous, yet will I not lift up my head. I am full of confusion, therefore see thou mine affliction, for it increases. Thou huntest me as a fierce lion, and again thou showest thyself marvelous upon me. Thou renewest thy witness against me, and increasest thine indignation upon me. Changes in war are against me. Wherefore then hast thou brought me forth out of the womb? Oh, that I had given up the ghost, and no eye had seen me. I should have been as though I had not been. I should have been carried from the womb to the grave. Are not my days few? Cease then, and let me alone, that I may take comfort a little. Before I go whence I shall not return, even to the land of darkness and the shadow of death, a land of darkness and as darkness itself, and of the shadow of death, without any order, where the light is as darkness. Now in Job 14:1, you don't have to turn there, it says, man that is born of a woman is of few days and full of trouble. He cometh forth like a flower and is cut down. He fleeth also as a shadow and continueth not. Now, we see Job here. Job is really kind of complaining about life. I mean, he literally says, I wish I was carried from the womb to the grave. He's saying, I wish my life was done. I wish my life was over. And we see really a side of Job that I think sometimes we can relate to, because we've all gotten to a point sometimes in our life where it feels like this is hopeless. I think sometimes we get to a point, we've all at one point or another, I'm sure we'd all agree with me, have y'all at one point or another felt like life was hopeless?
Yeah. And
you wished, hey, God, I wish you'd just take it from me. I wish you'd just take my life from me right now. We've all gotten there. Let's be honest. And we're not supposed to say that as Christians. We're not supposed to say that as Christians, right? We're supposed to say, hey, I'm never supposed to feel like that. I'm always supposed to be trusting God. I'm always supposed to be having faith that he's going to turn things around. But here it says in Job chapter 10:16, just to go over the verse one more time, it says, for it increases. Thou huntest me as a fierce lion, and again thou showest thyself marvelous upon me. I believe Job here is talking to God. He's saying, thou showest thyself marvelous upon me. I believe he's saying, hey, God, you're showing yourself marvelous upon me, but it's not in a good way. It's in a way where he feels like, God, this is hurting me. My life is hard right now. God, you're showing yourself marvelous upon me. I mean, the misery is there, the darkness is there, and the blackness is there. And I feel like all these things, if you read the book of Job, all the things that have come against him, all the hardship he faced, all the hardship he faced in his life, all the hardship he faced in his health, and he saw his friends come against him. He lost his family. His wife had said, curse God and die. And he felt like, hey, I'm at the worst I can be. And he's saying, God shows himself marvelous upon me. He's saying, I wish that I was done. Now I can imagine what Peter felt when he was in jail and he was being locked up. He's probably wondering, hey, what's happening here? Why is this situation happening in my life? And I'm sure every one of us can say we are many times at a point in our life where we're saying to God, why is this happening? Why is this situation in my life? Why do I have these problems maybe with my family members? Why do I have these problems at work? There's some people today maybe got this coronavirus is for real, right? In Toronto, like it's I'm hurting a lot of people who are elderly. This is really impacting them, but it's probably impacting some people also who are not necessarily elderly. I mean, a lot of people have died from that, and I think that there's a fear. How many people at least at one point got a little scared about the coronavirus? Maybe paranoia hit you.
Yeah.
I'm glad. I'm not seeing many hands up, and I'm glad. Now, my mom has been texting me like wildfire about the coronavirus, and she just texted me, no joke, before the service, saying, hey, the government's saying now, don't go out and have any contact with anybody unless it's absolutely necessary. She's like, can you call me? I mean, it's just paranoia. And if she's listening to this, then she'll probably get it. She'll be like, why did you say that? But the bottom line is, there's going to be someone probably in the city who's going to get this. And it's going to impact them greatly. And let's face it, Job had his health impacted greatly. Peter, as he was in prison, his life was impacted to a way where he didn't know what was going to happen. Now, continuing on in Acts chapter 12, verse 5. Acts chapter 12, verse 5 says, Peter therefore was kept in prison, but prayer was made without ceasing of the church unto God for him. And when Herod would have brought him forth, the same night Peter was sleeping between two soldiers, bound with two chains, and the keepers before the door kept the prison. Now, interesting enough here, it's saying here that in verse 6, it says, Herod was about to bring him forth. Herod was really about to bring Peter forth. He bound Peter because it pleased the Jews when he killed James. That night, the night before he was about to bring Peter forth, Peter's bound to change. Imagine what he was thinking in his life. Imagine what he was thinking, hey, look, this is it, right? I mean, if something happens, can we not face serious persecution as Christians at some point in this country? I mean, yeah, for sure. Especially, I mean, and it'll probably happen in the midst of a crisis. Today, I don't think this coronavirus will go into the midst of a crisis, but it's possible. And when that happens, you could see like kind of totalitarian-like measures. And regardless, though, there will be persecution against Christians, great persecution at some point. It might not be today or tomorrow, but it will happen. And imagine being bound for the Word of God and knowing that they're going to bring you forth, and knowing what they've done to other Christians. Peter had to be at a point where he was like, hey, I'm in dire need right now. And imagine Peter was at Pentecost and he got to preach and see many people saved. He got to see God use him in a great way. I mean, he was upon this rock I will build my church, and the great gates of hell shall not prevail against it. Now, I believe God was also Jesus Christ. He was that rock, but I believe also there was some analysis to looking at Peter being a pillar and a rock also. And Peter had been used by God in a great way, but now he's not knowing what's going to happen. He doesn't know if they're going to torture him. He knows what they did to Jesus. He knows that they whipped him, that they beat him badly, and now he's at rock bottom. He's at rock bottom. And Job, when we read about Job, he was at rock bottom. He's saying, "Thou showest thyself wondrous upon me." And as Christians, we ought not to think that we're immune to that. We ought not to think that we're immune to not having that happen to us. We ought not to think that God might put certain situations in our life, in our family, or with our friends, or at work, that we might feel like, hey, I'm at rock bottom right now. I'm at rock bottom right now. Now, continuing on here in Acts chapter 12. Acts chapter 12, verse 7. And it says, "And behold, the angel of the Lord came unto him." Let's just backtrack to verse 6 there for one moment. Here it says, Acts chapter 12, verse 6, it says, "But when Herod would have brought him forth the same night, Peter was sleeping between two soldiers, bound with two chains, and the keepers before the door kept the prison." So they're about to bring him forth. It's the night before. They're going to bring him forth. He's going to have judgment. And it says, "And behold, the angel of the Lord came upon him, and a light shined in the prison. And he smote Peter on the side and raised him up, saying, Arise up quickly. And his chains fell off him from his hands. And the angel said unto him, Gird thyself, and bind on thy sandals. And so he did. And he saith unto him, Cast thy garment about thee, and follow me. And he went out and followed him. It wist not that it was true, which was done by the angel, but thought he saw a vision." Imagine that being in Peter's position right now, or all of a sudden he's in prison and the angel of the Lord comes and lets him loose. I mean, it's literally he's at the last bit. He's at that point of desperation. I mean, have you ever been at a point of desperation where you felt like God answered? Mm-hmm. Have you ever been in that? I know I've been in that point of desperation where I feel like God answered. And Peter gets to a point of desperation where he's about to have his life taken, but all of a sudden he sees God intervene. Mm-hmm. I mean, it says an angel of the Lord was sent to unlock Peter and to let him out. I mean, he even so much so that Peter thought he saw a vision. Now, continuing on, it says in Acts chapter 12, verse 10, it says, "And when they were past the first and second ward, they came unto the iron gate that leadeth unto the city, which opened to them of his own accord." All of a sudden, a gate opens of his own accord. I mean, it just opens. This is a miraculous thing that's happening. I mean, the gate just opens up. An angel of the Lord is sent to Peter. That's a miraculous thing. How many people love to see an angel of the Lord come meet? How many people like come to face with the angel of the Lord? I mean, if it happened to Peter, could it happen to us? We hear about the angel of the Lord coming in the Old Testament. All of a sudden, the gate opens of his court, and they went out and passed on through one street, and forthwith the angel departed from him. And when Peter was come to himself, he said, Now I know of a surety that the Lord hath sent his angel, and hath delivered me out of the hand of Herod, and from all the expectation of the people of the Jews. Now, at that time that this had happened, can you imagine what Peter was thinking? I mean, he was rock bottom. He was about probably to be delivered to his death, and all of a sudden, God sends an angel of the Lord. All of a sudden, God opens the gate miraculously. Now, when that happened, at that point, who do you think Peter would be trusting upon for strength? Himself or God?
God.
God. At that point, I mean, let's face it, Peter probably did some things of his own accord in his life where he realized that by his strength and might, maybe he did some things and got himself out of situations. But when he's seen here as a miraculous thing happen, he's seen God come into a situation and miraculously intervening for him. you imagine what that would be like? Can you imagine being in that situation? I mean, I'll be honest with you, this was a situation in our church about in the summer. And we unfortunately, I never want to see people go in the church. We had some people who had gone, and it hurt. Anytime someone leaves the church, it hurts. I mean, we everyone, as I was telling Brother Dave, everyone counts. Mm-hmm. Everyone's a piece of that puzzle. Everyone brings something different to the table. I'm telling you. Everyone who comes in here, anyone who comes in here with the right spirit and the right heart, I mean, it brings something to the table that's just so apparent. And maybe you might not see that, but I do see that. And I do appreciate everyone's coming. Brother Dave, you've helped us so much. Just setting up and being here and encouraging us. Brother Justin and Emily, Justin coming out and playing piano, and I mean that's huge. Mm-hmm. You know, just when we have it at the community center, and we got the microphones on, it just sounds so good. You know, we're kind of closed doors here today because of the coronavirus and stuff, but it just sounds so good. You know, and everyone brings something. Fong, her attitude when we knocked on the door, Fong's got a great attitude. She's always optimistic. Me and my wife spent a lot more time with her. But everyone brings something different to the table. We lost some, unfortunately, for churches lose some people, and it was a kind of a hurtful time. These are people that we cared about. These are people when they started with us, they intended to be with us. They intended to build this church and strengthen this church. And when we lost them, it hurt a lot. And maybe as pastor, I'm not supposed to say that, but it hurt. And it was not a good time. And it was a time where some of these people were important. And I was just going up and leading up to the first service after that had happened. I mean, I was trying to be positive because I'm like, we're moving forward. There's a reason why this happened. I mean, remember when unfortunately, Paul and Barnabas, they parted company. Mm-hmm. And when Paul and Barnabas parted company, they both kind of went in two different directions and spread the work of God out. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know if that was God's intention, but God ended up using it to work. But going into that service, I'm trying to be positive, and I believe God gave me a word that I really wanted to preach, and I was excited about preaching it that week. I was thinking about a vision of so many. I felt that something that was going on with some of these people, that they were being pessimistic about seeing people saved at doors. And I believe that when, for whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. And I believe that when we knock on someone's door, that we have the ability to see someone saved. And sometimes, let's face it, some Christians takes a while to grow. And I felt that there's some pessimism towards that. But I ever since I had gotten saved, I wanted to see people saved. I know that it's not hard to be saved. I know that whosoever believeth in him should not perish but have eternal life. And I have faith that people will believe that message. And I don't want pessimism about that. And I was excited about preaching the word of God that week, but I was hurt also about losing some key people. Now that day, I came into the service, and some of the people that were with us at the time, they were keeping a positive attitude. But that day, as I was doing the Bible study, all of a sudden, two people walk in. I never seen them before. We were having a hard time getting visitors for a while. And all of a sudden, two people walk in, and they seem like serious Christians. I mean, they were like, I'm like, who are these people? And then later on, another guy comes in. His name was Benjamin. He was attending here. He had moved back to Africa. He's planning to come back in the summer. He comes in. And I mean, all of a sudden, and I was excited about preaching. I was excited about preaching this message. But these people that God had, I really felt at that time that God had sent these people to us. The day before, I was knocking out on doors. Do you think I wanted people to come to church?
Yeah.
Yes. Absolutely. I couldn't even give anyone the gospel that day. I could barely get verses out of my mouth that day. I wanted people to come in the service. But all of a sudden, I come in there, and what I saw was God doing something and not me doing something. What I saw was God sending people and not me sending people. I mean, we had our time getting visitors was so hard. All of a sudden, these three people come in. Now, two of those people were from the States, and they were just there. They were just visiting that week. But they were strong Christians. I mean, they were Christians that I wish that we had in our church, because they would make a difference in our church. The man, Benjamin, came, he's reached out to me asking for prayer requests about a friend of his, and he was a blessing to come. And all of a sudden, in this moment, I see God doing something, saying to me, when it gets tough, when it gets hard, you watch and
that's when I'll do something. And I think that that's what happened here with Peter. That when Peter was like, hey, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if my life's going to, if they're going to take my life. But when he gets to that point where it hurts the most, that's when God sends that angel. That's when that gate opens of one accord. And I believe God was doing that for a reason for Peter. There's a reason behind that. I believe there's a reason why God puts these bad situations in our life. I believe there's something about it. Now, if you turn your Bible to Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 12. Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 12. Deuteronomy 8:12, it says, lest when thou hast eaten and art full, and hast built goodly houses, and dwelt therein, and when thy herds and thy flock multiply, and thy silver and thy gold is multiplied, and all that thou hast is multiplied, then thine heart be lifted up, and thou forget the Lord thy God, which brought thee forth out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage. Verse 17, if you can jump down there. And thou say in thine heart, my power and my might of mine hath gotten me this wealth. Now this is what's dangerous, I believe, when we start to think that we're responsible for our own well-being. When we start to think about, I have this job because I'm just a smart guy and I'm a hard worker. I mean, let's face it, it's good to be a hard worker, right? Brother David, you can't go anywhere in this life right without being a hard worker, right? You can testify to that. Brother Justin and Emily, you can't go anywhere in school without working hard, right? Now, but the bottom line is, I think many times we start to think about, hey, I'm doing this. I'm doing it. It's me who's doing it. Hey, I've got money in my bank account, or I've got a house an apartment I live in because I'm a hard worker, because of what I do. Now, if you turn your Bibles to Job chapter 29, Job chapter 29, verse 1. Job chapter 29, verse 1. Job 29, verse 1. And it says, moreover, Job continued his parable and said, oh, that I were in months past, as in the days that when God preserved me. Verse number 7. Sweetheart, are you okay?
Yes.
Yeah, you okay? Job chapter 29, verse 7. So Job 29, verse 1 and 2, it says, moreover, Job continued his parable and said, oh, that I were in months past, as in the days when God preserved me. Verse 7, it says, when I went out to the gate through the city, when I prepared my seat in the street, the young men saw me and hid themselves, and the aged arose and stood up. The princes refrained talking. They laid their hand on their mouth. The nobles held their peace, and their tongue cleaved to the roof of their mouth. When the ear heard me, then it blessed me. When the eye saw me, it gave witness to me. Jumping down to verse 14, it says, I put on righteousness, and it clothed me. My judgment was as a robe and a diadem. Here Job he's kind of remembering his old days where he was kind of like the man. Job is remembering his old days when he was like, hey, he says, I put on righteousness and it clothed me. Now, is there any really righteous? And the Bible says, as is written, there's none righteous, no, not one. But we are all as an unclean thing, and all our righteousnesses are as filthy rags. Job's remembering the times where I was the man. I mean, people were scared of me, and when I talked to everyone, shut up. He's kind of thinking about the time where he was like, like the king, the big man. But I believe that, God has, in some sense, is this the attitude you want to have? Is this the attitude that God wants us to have? And I think sometimes as Christians, when we get to know God's word, and we want to apply God's word, we start to, in a sense, get sin out of our lives. How many people, when you got saved, you got sin out of your life? You started to get sin out of your life. And you started to grow, and you started to work on things and get stronger. And sometimes when we do that, we get a little judgmental of other people who are struggling. Mm-hmm. And sometimes when we do that, we feel good about ourselves. Maybe we get a little puffed up. And I think Christians, they can get puffed up. We get puffed up just because they feel like they're living right. And I think that Job had gotten a little puffed up a little bit. I mean, Job, let's face it, it says in Job that he was a perfect and upright man, a man who feared God and escheweth evil. Job was it says perfect and an upright man, one that feared God and escheweth evil. It's saying he was perfect and upright. I mean, his sons, he was worried about his sons and he went out and offered burnt offerings. I mean, he was a righteous man, and I believe that in a sense he got a little puffed up. And I believe that, I mean, obviously we know that the reason why the things that happened in Job's life was because God allowed the devil to attack him. But he said, don't take, you can take everything from him, but you can't take his life. But I believe too that Job, in a sense, had to learn a little bit about where true strength comes from. And I believe that when we get brought low in our life, I believe God's sometimes doing that because he's trying to get us closer to him. And I believe that when something bad is happening to your life right now, if there's something you're struggling with, probably everybody's struggling with something. I mean, we're all struggling with something. I even this week, I said, sometimes we all think, hey, God's showing himself wonders upon me. Not necessarily in a good way, but because of all the things that are happening to me, they're tough. And I think that sometimes God's got to make things tough on us. He's got to bring in some hardship so we realize that we need to rely on him. Because I believe he's got to bring that hardship to us so that we get on our knees. I know that last year some of the hardships I was going through, it brought me on my knees closer to God. It made me realize I need to spend more time in prayer. And when Peter sees something like a miracle happen, when he got let out of prison at the right time, when he was down down for the count, I believe that. Do you believe that strengthened his faith?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, if you turn your Bibles to John chapter 20. John chapter 20. John chapter 20, verse 19. Now, of course, one of the apostles had followed Jesus around, during his ministry, during his 3-year ministry. They followed him. They saw him do great things. And it says in John chapter 20, and of course they also saw him be crucified. And they were bitter about it. I mean, you imagine that. This was supposed to be the Messiah, and he's dead. He's gone. And they're hurt. They're beside themselves. This was the man they loved. This was the Christ, and he's dead. They saw him crucified. They saw him die. But it says here in John chapter 20, 19, it says, "Then the same day at evening, being the first day of the week, when the doors were shut, where the disciples were assembled for fear of the Jews, came Jesus and stood in the midst, and saith unto them, Peace be unto you. And when he had so said, he showed unto them his hands and his side. Then were the disciples glad when they saw the Lord. Then said Jesus to them again, Peace be unto you. As my Father hath sent me, even so send I you." Now all the disciples here, they're assembled for fear of the Jews, and they're behind closed doors for fear of the Jews. And they heard some people say that Jesus was back, and I know some of them didn't believe it. And all of a sudden, they see Jesus, who they saw crucified, died, and they probably started to doubt, was this really the Christ? Was this really the Messiah? And all of a sudden, miraculously, you imagine you're following around Jesus all that time, and then you saw him die. You'd be miserable, wouldn't you? You'd be bitter. But then all of a sudden, they see the greatest, in a sense, miracle that ever happened in the world. They see Jesus come back into their midst, come back into the room, and all of a sudden, he's there. All of a sudden, the man that they saw crucified, that died on the cross, they see that they witnessed, hey, the resurrection from the dead. They saw the resurrected Jesus. At this point, they had to know that, oh my, we were wrong to ever doubt. We were wrong to ever wonder if that was the Messiah. He's right here. He's with us. I mean, he's risen from the dead. I mean, you imagine what that did. You imagine what that moment was like. You imagine how they felt when they saw him. This was undoubtedly the greatest miracle. Everything that Christ had said before his ministry, Peter was so scared he denied Christ. And there was probably during those 3 days starting to question, are we crazy? Maybe we were wrong. Maybe we were deceived. But when he came back, was that not a confirmation everything he said was right?
Yes.
Was that not a confirmation that this was the Messiah, this was God, and everything he laid out in his commandments, everything he laid out is for real, and that we need to follow it? Did that not strengthen their faith? When that strengthened their faith. I mean, did they not go out and preach and see, thousands of people saved at Pentecost? Because, I mean, they had, how many people believe that zeal to go out and preach was because they just saw the resurrected Jesus? I mean, listen, the events are coincided. I mean, just because they saw that miracle, all of a sudden they were restored. And I believe that when Peter was put in prison, I believe that God what he's trying to do is he brought him low because he needed to realize probably, or maybe he didn't do it for this reason, but I believe God brings us low because he wants to do something miraculous sometimes. I believe God brings us low because he's bringing us low, making us realize how weak we are, how futile our efforts are to do anything. And when he brings us out of it, when he brought Peter out of it, did that not confirm and strengthen his faith? I mean, absolutely. Did that not confirm and strengthen his faith? Not only now does he remember the resurrection of Christ coming back, but now he remembers that angel of the Lord coming to him in a terrible situation, freeing him, having the gate open up, and now he has some firepower in his back to realize, you know what? I don't know what I'm going to go through, but God's going to come through. I don't know what's going to happen, but I know God's going to come through. I don't know, and you might be thinking in your life, how many people can think of at least one time in your life where God came through miraculously? Yeah. Absolutely. And I shared that story with the church because I believe that God came through miraculously. I know that there was a time when I was saved and I really wanted to have a soul winning partner, someone to go out and knock on doors. And I didn't want to really do it myself. And I fasted and prayed, God, can you send somebody who will teach me how to go? I was going to a church, and unfortunately the church was very, very Calvinistic, and I was having hard times with the church. At the time, my wife was going to that church, and I wanted to get my wife's phone number and date her, but I wasn't sure exactly how to go about it. And I remember when I was, but I really too also wanted the right church, the right fit. And I wanted a soul winning partner. I wanted to date my wife, and a lot of things that I really needed and wanted. And I was thinking just even about the church. I was having a hard time going to that church, and I remember I was at a date with some girl, and I was like, church's not perfect. I'm looking for something a little bit different. And she's like, it'll all work out. And I was like, really? How's it all going to work out? I don't even know where am I going to go. I honestly thought that, but when she said that, I'm like, maybe it will work out. And all of a sudden, all these things started to come together. God sent me that soul winning partner that went out with me. And I went, me and him, and then not only he sent me that soul winning partner, but he got me a church that I never even knew existed that was, I felt like God called me to go to. I mean, I never felt so much that I was supposed to be part of a church than that church. It was just a small church. And God had then given me this soul winning partner. And then I got my wife's phone number. I started to date my wife. All of a sudden, all these things started to happen, realizing that this is the work of God. When I think about that situation, I had to say, this was God working and showing me something. I had to, in order to really appreciate those things, I had to be brought low. I had to be brought to a point where I had to fast and say, I want to go out and give people the gospel. I want to go out and be able to tell someone about how to be saved from the Bible. I want to have that boldness, but the churches I was going to, unfortunately, they weren't doing it. And I'd ask, do you guys have a time where you go and do evangelism? And some of the places just kind of went out and just handed out tracts, and they didn't have it. I was hurt, but I had to be brought low. I had to be brought low to that point. And interesting enough, that so many partner that God sent me, eventually he stopped going to that church. But it was just in time that I learned enough that I was willing to go out myself and do it. And it's like God just worked it out. And interesting enough too, that church that I went to, when I started to fast, it was when that church just started. It was just getting started. I didn't know about it. But God has a way of working things out. God has a way of working things out. God has a way of bringing us low. And then when he brings us low, he brings us out of the dung hole and says, hey, it's not you, it's me. Trust me. You can trust me. You can know that I'm going to come through. And when he resurrected from the dead and came, as it says in John 20, he's saying, you didn't believe it, you doubted, but now I'm here. Now you gotta believe. Now you gotta know that I'm gonna come through it. I believe that is what God's trying to show us when bad things happen.
Amen.
So when we think about this coronavirus and whether or not maybe it'll affect us or someone, you know what? It might affect you. It could affect you. It could get to that point. But if it's God's will that you die, it's God's will that you die. But it probably isn't. It wasn't God's will that Peter would die here, because Peter lived to be an old man. We know that it was talked about John 20. He lived to be old. He would live to do many things for God. But God's got to do that to us to make us realize it's not my power, it's not my might, but it's his might, and it's him that does everything. And we always need to realize those things. Now, you think about Job. Job was a man who just God took him, allowed the devil to take everything from him. He allowed him to take his family, his sons and daughters, all his substance, his health, and then he started to bring people against him. The devil, his wife, cursed God and died. His friends condemning him as he's down and out. You know, kind of like kicking a dog when he's down. That's what his friends did. Isn't that what his friends did? And Job, kicking a dog when he's down. Unfortunately, when you're down, sometimes people kick you like a dog, and it's too bad. And Job got to the worst. But later on, it says in Job 42:12, it says, so the Lord blessed the latter end of Job more than his beginning, for he had 14,000 sheep and 6,000 camels and 1,000 yoke oxen and 1,000 she-asses. He also had 7 sons and 3 daughters. Jumping down to verse 16, and then after this, Job lived 140 years and saw his sons and his sons' sons, even 4 generations. So Job died, being old and full of days. So Job gets twice as much as he had before. He gets sons and daughters back. He lives full of days, and he remembers. I mean, imagine that. A man losing everything he had, all his substance, losing his family, getting to a point in health where it looked like he's going to die, and then all of a sudden a miraculous turnaround like this. Do you think that people were like this, God's hands in his life? And do you think that reinforced to Job that my hands in God's life and not mine? Who do you think Job would be trusting on the rest of his life? God. And I think this is just like it says here in Psalm. What I believe he's trying to get us to realize is, if you turn your Bible to Psalm chapter 136, Psalm chapter 136, and it says, in Psalm 136, it says, to him alone doeth great wonders, for his mercy endureth forever. Verse 10, it says, to him that smote Egypt and their firstborn, for his mercy endureth forever. And he brought out Israel from among them, for his mercy endureth forever. With a strong hand and a stretched out arm, for his mercy endureth forever. To him which divided the Red Sea into parts, for his mercy endureth forever. And made Israel pass through the midst of it, for his mercy endureth forever. But overthrew Pharaoh and his host in the Red Sea, for his mercy endureth forever. To him which led his people through the wilderness, for his mercy endures forever. And it's always to him, to God. It's saying, God, it's God who did this. It's God who's going to get me through it. Whatever you're going through in your life, it's God that's going to get you through it. And if bad things are happening in your life, it's probably God trying to draw you closer to him and waiting for that time where he can show himself miraculously upon him. Now, interesting enough, people, when Peter was in prison, what the disciples were doing, I mean, they were praying for him. Mm-hmm. They were praying that he would get out. And when he got out, they didn't even believe it. When the lady who opened the door and saw him, and she ran for excitement back to them, say, "Hey, well, I saw Peter." They didn't even believe her. They didn't even believe that their own prayers would be answered. You ever had something? Peter thought he saw a vision when he's getting out of prison. Has God ever done something in your life where you're like almost didn't believe it with your eyes? Yeah. I thought, oh my, this is not real. This is not real. I've had that happen. We got to realize that prayer, God will take that prayer seriously. When we pray, what we're showing to God is we're saying, hey, I can't do it. You can do it. And I believe that when we get to that point of desperation, that's where God does the miracle. And we can feel that sense of desperation. If you ever feel that sense of desperation, I believe that's a sign that, many times I believe it's a sign that if you have an extreme sense of desperation, I know in my life, when I've had an extreme sense of desperation, I prayed, many times I've seen God work the miracle. Mm-hmm. I always saw him work the miracle. He never leave me nor forsake me. And I believe that God brings us low sometimes because he's trying to get us closer to him. And he's trying to show us, he's waiting for that time where he's going to show something in our life to show us, I'm there for you and I'm going to take care of you. And you're going to know it's not you, but me. And because of that, you're going to have the memory of that to keep you through the tough times that will follow, knowing that I will again come back and I will show myself again to you. And we'll end there in prayer.